The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of St. Mary's Hospital, but inside the waiting area, the air felt heavy with despair. Among the weary faces and hurried footsteps, one voice rose above the rest, broken, trembling, and desperate. A young mother, clothes torn at the seams, and a teddy bear dangling from her arm, clutched her sick child close to her chest. Her knees buckled as she fell near the reception counter, crying out, "Please, someone, please save my daughter." It wasn't just a cry for help. It was a scream of a soul breaking under the weight of helplessness. People turned to look, some with pity, others with indifference, but none stepped forward. She was invisible to most, just another struggling soul in a world moving too fast to care. But in that moment, fate placed someone in the hallway who was never supposed to be there. A man whose life was filled with riches, power, and privilege. A man whose decisions moved markets and built empires. His name was Adrian Cross, one of the wealthiest men in the country. And what he witnessed that morning would change him forever. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Comment below to tell us why stories of hope matter to you. Adrian had only come to the hospital for a quick board meeting about a new medical wing his foundation was funding. He had no intention of stopping in the waiting area. His life was a carefully managed schedule of luxury cars, private jets, and appointments that never waited. But as he passed the counter, he froze. His sharp eyes landed on the woman kneeling on the cold floor, holding a fragile little girl whose cheeks were pale and whose small chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. The mother's name was Marissa Lane. Life had not been kind to her. Once a bright student with dreams of becoming a teacher, she had been abandoned by her partner when their baby girl Sophie was only a few months old. Since then, she worked 3 cleaning jobs, often skipping meals so her daughter could eat. Poverty clung to her not just in her torn jacket and worn shoes, but in the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Yet, her eyes told a different story. They burned with fierce love, the kind only a mother fighting for her child could carry. For weeks, Sophie had been ill. A fever that would not break, weakness that left her unable to stand, and a cough that grew worse by the day. Doctors had confirmed she needed an urgent, expensive treatment. Without it, her chances were slim. Marissa had begged every charity, knocked on every door, but all she collected were sympathetic smiles and whispered apologies. And now, at the hospital desk, she was being told once again, "We can't start the treatment without the payment." Her cries echoed through the sterile hallway. "Please, she's just a child. Take me instead if you must, but don't let her die. I'll do anything." Her voice cracked as Sophie whimpered faintly in her arms. Adrian felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't allowed in years. His empire was built on hard contracts, tough negotiations, and an unshakable belief that every man and woman controlled their own destiny. But as he looked at Marissa and her fragile daughter, he saw a truth he had ignored. Sometimes people didn't fail because of laziness or weakness. Sometimes life simply crushed them under burdens too heavy to carry. He could have walked away. He could have told himself it wasn't his problem. But instead, he found his steps moving toward her. When Marissa lifted her tear face and her desperate eyes met his, she didn't see a billionaire. She saw another human being who might still have a heart. Adrian spoke quietly to the nurse, and in moments the resistance faded. "Prepare the child for immediate treatment. All expenses will be covered under my account," he said firmly. The nurse, stunned, nodded and rushed to comply. Marissa gasped, clutching Sophie closer as if afraid the promise would vanish. "Why?" she whispered through her sobs. "Why would you do this for us?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. His gaze fell on Sophie's tiny hand wrapped around the teddy bear, the symbol of innocence she clung to, even in sickness. Finally, he said, "Because no child should pay the price for what the world failed to give. And no mother should beg for mercy that should already be hers." As the hours passed, Sophie was admitted and doctors began the life-saving procedure. Marissa waited outside the room, trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. Adrian stayed too, his expensive suit and polished shoes out of place among the worn plastic chairs of the waiting area. He sat beside her in silence, his presence a strange comfort. Memories haunted Adrian as he waited. Long ago, he had grown up in poverty himself. His own mother had faced countless nights of hunger just to keep him alive. He had buried those memories under layers of wealth and success, never allowing himself to feel that pain again. But Marissa's voice had torn down those walls, reminding him of where he came from and of a love he once knew. The love of a mother who gave everything. Hours later, the doctors returned with news. Sophie's condition had stabilized. The treatment was working. Relief flooded Marissa's face, and she collapsed into tears. This time of gratitude, she turned to Adrian, unable to find words strong enough to thank him. But Adrian wasn't finished. He learned about Marissa's struggles, how she juggled jobs, how rent consumed her small income, how every day was a battle just to provide her daughter a chance to live. His heart, hardened by years of business battles, softened in the face of her resilience. Quietly, he made a decision. He arranged for Marissa to receive steady financial support, not as charity, but as a job within his foundation. He promised her flexible hours, enough to provide for Sophie without sacrificing her health. He also set up an education trust fund for Sophie, ensuring she would never be denied opportunities because of poverty. Marissa, overwhelmed, shook her head in disbelief. "You don't even know us. Why go this far?" Adrian finally allowed himself a small smile. "Because once someone gave my mother and me a chance, and it changed everything. I think it's time I return that gift." The story of Adrian Cross and Marissa Lane spread quietly at first, whispered among hospital staff, then carried by those who had witnessed the scene. In a world often clouded by greed and indifference, one act of kindness had ignited hope. A billionaire, once untouchable, had chosen to bend down and lift someone who had fallen. And that choice had not only saved a little girl's life, but had also rewritten the future for an entire family. As the sun set that evening, Marissa held Sophie close. Her daughter's tiny breath stronger now, her color returning. For the first time in years, Marissa felt something she thought she had lost forever. Safety, hope, and the belief that miracles still happened. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like this remind us that compassion is more powerful than wealth, and a single act of kindness can change lives forever.